Dr. Bart Ehrman is back to promote his new online course, The Unknown Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Join Dr. Ehrman for 8 30-minute lessons and hear about the Gospels from an historian's point of view. Were the Gospels written by eyewitnesses? Were the stories in the Gospels changed during oral circulation? How do we explain differences in their accounts of Jesus' life? Did the Gospel authors actually care about what really happened? All these questions and more will be discussed during this course. The online course will be available from September, or you can watch the live recordings on August 6th and 7th. Early bird pricing is only $47.95, as long as you buy before July 27th. After that, the regular price will be $53.95. Use the Digital Hammurabi affiliate link to help support our channel. Without further ado, let's talk to Dr. Ehrman. So, Bart, thank you for joining me again. It's always a pleasure to see you. What is your new course about?
Well, so it's on the Gospels of the New Testament, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and we're calling it the Unknown Gospels because even though they're probably the most widely read books of the Bible, most people don't really know what experts have said about them over all these years. And so the course will be trying to explain in simple layperson terms what scholars have found out about these books.
Fantastic, thank you. And why are the Gospels important for academics as opposed to Christian lay people?
Well, I think probably everybody should agree, whether they do or not. I think everybody should agree that Jesus is the most important figure historically and culturally for our civilization, and our virtually our only source of information about Jesus would be the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And so if you don't know about what the Gospels are all about and whether they accurately portray Jesus, whether they record what he really said, if they record what he really did, if you don't understand what they are, or where they come from, or what they say, then it affects rather in a major way the figure that is worshipped by over 2 billion people in the world. So I'd say it's pretty important.
I think I'd probably agree with you there. So you've said there are obviously 4 Gospels. I think most people watching will know that and will be roughly familiar with them. When you're looking at the scholarship for those 4 Gospels, are there great differences between approaches people take or the conclusions they come to, or is it more typical to approach them as a group?
You mean whether each of the 4 is different from each other?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's one of the discoveries, I think, of modern scholarship that's been most important. It started really back in the 18th century, so it's been around a while, this idea, about 250 years or so, that the Gospels are not all telling the same story. This isn't a new discovery after the Enlightenment. Of course, people in early Christianity realized that the 4 Gospels were different from each other. But what started impressing scholars during the Enlightenment was just how different they are, to the point where there are differences that cannot be reconciled between Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. They'll tell the same story in ways that might be contradictory. And some of these are important stories. We're not just talking about little details, although there are a lot of details that are different, but overall portrayals of who Jesus is and what he said and what he did differ from one gospel to the other. And so it creates a very interesting situation, because the Gospels, on one level, it's good because they provide us a kind of a kaleidoscope view of Jesus. But on the other hand, if you really want to know something about what he said and did, how do you proceed?
Are there very significant contradictions then between how they depict Jesus?
Oh yeah, I'd say rather significant contradictions. I mean, was he born of a virgin or not? Did he call himself God or not? What did he actually teach? What was his message? If you read the Gospel of John and you read the Gospel of Mark, he's preaching a very different message. People don't notice this because when the Gospels are put together into into a Bible, so they're all in the same book. They just assume that when you read a book and it's got 27 chapters, you assume that these chapters are going to be basically consistent with each other. But it's not like that with the Bible, because these are written by different authors at different times and different places to different people, and they have different points of view. Mm-hmm. And so it's really more like an anthology of texts with different authors. And so it's not fair to make one author say what another author's saying. They might be saying different things. And so that's a major view of scholarship today.
Thank you. Were the Gospels then written with different audiences in mind?
Yeah, the authors, we don't actually know the names of the authors, but they were Greek-speaking followers of Jesus 40, 50, 60 years after his death, and they were all living in different places. And it looks like each of them is simply trying to write an account of what Jesus said and did for his own community. And his own community has its own issues, it has its own beliefs, its own views, perspectives, understandings of things, literal situations, and each author is addressing these audiences. And so naturally their messages will be different.
Thank you. I know the course you're teaching is on the canonical Gospels. Are there non-canonical Gospels?
Oh boy, are there. There are. We have a lot of them. We have, from the early centuries of Christianity, we have either complete or fragmentary copies of about 40 other Gospels. None of them is as early as Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, but some are pretty close, and some of them may have historical information. But what's most notable about them is how legendary they are. And this simply shows that Christians had no trouble coming up with stories about Jesus that were not historically accurate, and probably that tendency to exaggerate or to come up with significant stories probably goes way back in the Christian tradition, and probably affected the canonical gospel. But you can certainly see that with these later gospels: the Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Peter, the Gospel of Mary, the Gospel of Judas. I mean, go on and on. There are about 40 of these things.
How then were the canonical Gospels chosen for inclusion in what we call the Bible?
Yeah, this is a very good and a very difficult and complex question. The early Christians had a Bible when they started out. The Hebrew Bible was their Bible. These were Jews, followers of Jesus, the Jews, the Jewish teachers. So they had a Bible. But as they came to believe that Jesus was the Messiah who had died for sins and been raised from the dead, different points of view about Jesus and what he meant and who he was and what he did and what he said and different views emerged over time. And so Christians needed written authorities that would be comparable to their Hebrew Bible, that would give them authoritative accounts of Jesus as well. A number of accounts were written, and Christian leaders had to decide which ones to include. There were debates that went on for a long time. We don't have anybody who actually names our 4 Gospels as the 4 Gospels until the end of the 2nd century, about 100 years after these books were in circulation. And we don't have anybody named our 27 books of the New Testament until 300 years after these books. And so there were long debates that took place over a long period of time.
Thank you. And when scholars are examining the Gospels, we've already talked briefly about how they approach the 4 canonical ones. When people are looking at the non-canonical Gospels, do they try and include the canonical Gospels as well and look at them as a whole corpus, or is it more usual to keep them as discrete categories?
Well, it really, historically, of course, the 4 Gospels have been treated as their own thing, and everything else has been treated as some other kind of thing. And I think one of the major movements among scholars in the last 50, 60 years has been to recognize that all of these are accounts of Jesus that are representing an author's point of view, given his own theological and religious perspectives, and that it's no less true of the Gospel of John than it is for the Gospel of Thomas. They're representing authors' theological and personal beliefs and putting those in a framework that discusses the life and teachings of Jesus. And so today, a lot of scholars think of the Gospels as a massive group, and these 4 are set apart in the sense that they're the earliest and they're the best read and they're the ones most known. But the others are not different in they're not really different phenomena. They're the same phenomena. It's just that they're the ones who didn't make it in.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. What is your favorite maybe contradiction or difficulty with the canonical Gospels?
Well, there are so many that are lovely that it's really kind of hard to say. The one I typically use to illustrate the problem is that both the earliest gospel we have is Mark and the latest gospel we have is John, the four. And they both give us an explicit account of which day Jesus died on and what time of day. Mark is absolutely clear. Jesus died on he was crucified the morning after the Passover meal was eaten, 9 o'clock in the morning on the Passover day after the Passover meal was eaten. John, written, I don't know, 25, 30 years later, is also completely explicit that Jesus died in the afternoon, the day before the Passover meal was eaten. And they both give explicit dates, and they're different. And the thing is, it's a contradiction. I mean, they both can't be right, but it's a contradiction that matters because the difference between them, if you actually study why they date it to the day they do, they actually have a theological reason for doing that. And so it actually enlightens what both Mark and John are trying to say if you recognize it's a contradiction. If you say, it's the same thing, then you miss the point of both gospel accounts. And so that's one of my favorites.
I think that something that a lot of people miss when they try and synchronize the Gospels is the diversity of what the texts are and what they're doing. And you see this in the Old Testament as well. People completely, in an effort to make it harmonious,
yes,
they miss an awful lot of fantastic information.
Well, they do. I mean, once you harmonize Genesis 1 and 2, you miss the point of both of them.
Absolutely. Well, Bart, thank you so much. Audience, if you are interested in this fantastic course, there is information in the video description and running across the bottom of your screen. Definitely take it. It sounds fascinating. And as ever, it has been a pleasure.
Yeah, me too. Thanks.
The Save Ancient Studies Alliance's virtual Opening the Ancient World conference is returning for its second year running this August. Our theme this year is Who Has the Power? Leaders and Leadership in the Ancient World. Visitors will hear from lots of researchers who have taken an unorthodox approach to studying ancient history outside of or adjacent to academia, and we are putting on presentations about cultures spanning all of the ancient world, such as the Persians, the ancient Chinese, the Egyptians, the Greeks, the Vikings, and the Mesoamericans. Recently, controversial leaders have dominated our news feeds. Ex-President Trump's role in the storming of the Capitol is still debated, and Vladimir Putin encroaches on others' territories. What do these political titans have in common with the leaders of old, and what can we learn from history? Or is it just doomed to repeat itself? The conference will be live-streamed on Sunday the 14th to Monday the 15th of August 2022 on the SASA YouTube and Facebook channels, and via the pages of our partners. Head to our website to RSVP now.